It is 6:14. Good morning. Sterling Fox with you here at CKNW, Global News Radio Vancouver, joined on the line from Toronto by Dino Sosi. Mr. Sosi is an instructional assistant in technology and media at the University of Toronto and is the author of a piece available today at theconversation.com entitled, Can We Cancel Culture? Dino Sosi, good morning and welcome to the program.
Sterling, great to hear your voice. You sound energetic for this early in the morning.
Well, I'm doing my best. We do try to wake up a city with a little energy at this side, Dino. Good to have you with us. Can we start the conversation, please, by having you tell us what you think cancel culture means? What is it?
Cancel culture is, in the online context, it's a phenomenon where a group of individuals who feel offended or oppressed, they use the power of the internet to remove a person from a position or lower their social standing because they found something that person did offensive or oppressive.
So because it all evolves around the internet, it is safe then to say, Dino, that this phenomenon has only been around for a very short while.
Yeah, as an internet phenomenon, it has, but it has its roots pop culturally as far back as the 1980s. Nile Rodgers, the legendary Chic guitarist, did a song called Your Love Is Cancelled in 1981. It was about a date he went on that went really poorly. Fast forward about a decade later, there's a iconic movie, New Jack City. They had a line in it that used cancellation, and it kind of they used some swear words. We won't share them this morning, of course. Mm-hmm. And then over those pop cultural references kind of folded into the mass consciousness, and as social media has kind of become bigger and stronger over the past decade or so, the idea of cancellation folded in with really popular social justice movements like Arab Spring, Black Lives Matter, Occupy Wall Street, Me Too. And then I think really recently over the last year and a half, I know earlier in the show you talked about a little bit about the pandemic and COVID pop-up clinics.
Yes.
A lot of people, they're homebound. A lot of people are really frustrated. So you get raw people on edge. You combine that with the social media, it's short outbursts. You have algorithms that prioritize engagement, and then you have this explosion of cancel culture.
Indeed. And where do you think it started? Because this sounds like, or certainly is most readily available on a large scale at the college level, on campuses. Is that where this all came from?
There is some of that. I think a lot of it, when people think about it as a phenomenon about what's motivating people, it is sort of a feeling oppressed, and like there's often at times a social justice component because it deals with hot button issues like race or sexual issues. So yeah. I think a lot of it kind of folds back into some of the things that we talk about at the university level, some of the really important issues of the day. So yeah, right. Certainly.
No, but now I'm just trying, because you're talking about some of the movements that have, I don't know whether benefit is the right word, Dino, but some of the movements that have been prominent in terms of the origins of cancel culture. And you mentioned, for example, the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, Occupy Wall Street, and so on. Those groups, in establishing the networks that became those groups, out of that network has evolved the whole cancel culture phenomenon, right?
Yeah, there are, I think, really big impetuses for them. Like, and again, it's really interesting, like, as a phenomenon. Black Lives Matter, which has been, obviously with the George Floyd movement and some of the other really bad things that have happened with our friends in the Black community. That's really been that phenomenon. Black Lives Matter started as a hashtag purely online, and then over time it evolved into an offline, real-time movement, which has been like a phenomenal development.
Mm-hmm. I suppose that's the thing that has surprised many, Dino, is the speed at which this has grown. And simply because of the speed, it represents acceptance. Whether or not the movement or even the notion of what it's all about is acceptable to large numbers of people doesn't appear to matter, because it is just so huge in and of itself.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key components is the speed, where you have one of the powers of the internet is it conflates and shortens time and space. So you can have something that's happening, like I'm sure you've heard of incidences where there's like a someone on a plane, something bad happens to them. They post an Instagram tweet, an Instagram message or a tweet or something, and all of a sudden, literally minutes later, the world finds out about it. So there's the speed is amazing. A global phenomenon can happen. It's absolutely breathtaking how the scope it can evolve to.
I suppose the other part about that's a bit surprising too is that, you know, of sort of how something like a fairly common complaint can snowball into some monstrosity that really loses the original context of the complaint in such a hurry. It develops so quickly. And I guess what's frightening to some, Dino, is the speed at which that happens, in which individuals and circumstances can get caught up in that snowball with no chance for defense.
Yeah, I think when you said before about the speed, that's such a big component, and then also like the volume of complaints that can be folded into a movement, and all of a sudden you have the one person, you know, hopefully if there's a mass movement against them, they've done something negative that sort of requires that to happen. But then if they didn't do anything so bad, just their ability to fight back is really, really difficult because, as again you said before, the speed and then the volume of responses that can happen, it can be just overwhelming for that person.
Well, exactly. And you know, and I'm rolling this into a conversation that I had based on an article yesterday written by Major General Danny Forte, who was, up until a very few short weeks ago, the general in charge of the Canadian vaccine rollout. You know who I'm talking about here. And General Forte was removed from his position as a senior member of the command structure of the Canadian Armed Forces, to say nothing of the vaccine commandant, because of an allegation based on something that happened over 30 years ago. He had no chance to defend himself. The whole thing escalated on social media. He lost his job, his position, his career, his status, and everything else based on an over 30-year-old allegation that he had no chance to defend himself against. And it was the momentum of the feedback based on the allegation that caused his political masters to remove him as quickly as they did. It was an easy way to deal with the situation. His point, however, was he was in the middle of the snowball, Dino. He was the guy whose name came up and, of course, caused all of this backlash, and it was immediate and enormous, and boom, he's gone. Like that. He's suing the government of Canada, by the way.
Well, one of the things that you touched upon, which is again a really important point to this, is that there can be allegations that may or may not be unfounded. We have in our legal systems we have due process. Things take time to develop. Allegations take time to develop. Getting evidence to find out whether those allegations are true, to adjudicate upon them, that takes time. That's a really slow, methodical, and really proper process, unfortunately, for a person like Danny Forte. In the court of public opinion, if there's enough of a momentum, as you say, and it is negative, it's really, really difficult. I don't know the particulars of his defense about these allegations, but even if he has some valid counter arguments, it's really difficult when the volume of allegations and negative press against him is that high. It's really, really difficult to push back.
Well, and that, of course, I suppose, is what's most feared by many about this whole cancel culture phenomenon, Dino, is the speed at which it moves, the lack of ability to defend oneself once it found in the crosshairs of the movement, and the incredible speed at which one literally does get eliminated or canceled. It's scary.
Yeah, and then there's this, I think, a danger from that. There are these examples that happen that if the speed is fast enough, the volume of complaints is fast enough, and enough people get eliminated, it becomes a toolkit for people that they may use these tools for unfortunate and negative ends that might not be justified. And obviously in our public sphere, we want to have people having robust honest conversations. That's incredibly important for a democracy. But
Sure.
you need to be able to have both sides being able to articulate themselves. And when it's completely one-sided, it becomes really problematic.
Indeed it is. Dino, please stand by. It's a great conversation, by the way. Lovely to have you on board today. Friends, we need to take a break for the news. Our guest is Dino Sosi from the University of Toronto, where he is an instructional assistant in technology and media. He is also the author of Can We Cancel Culture? You can have a look at it at theconversation.com while we take this break for the news.
This is Weekend Mornings with Sterling Fox on 980 CKNW.
Awfully nice to have you with us on this nice-looking Saturday morning. As John was saying, a beautiful day in store for us all, with highs in the mid-20s by the water and much closer to 30 inland. It's already 16 degrees here in New Westminster, where it all began for CKNW, those many decades ago. A pleasure to have Dino Sosi with us to start our program off today. Mr. Sosi is an instructional assistant at the University of Toronto in technology and media. He's also the author of a piece available this weekend at theconversation.com entitled Can We Cancel Culture? And from that article, let me just read one quick line. During this era of cancellation, opponents' transgressions are demonized. Slamming someone as irredeemably wicked on Twitter becomes common. Lives are irrevocably upended. We no longer reconcile differences with respectful conversations. The long-term outlook for public spaces as marketplaces of ideas becomes worrisome. That's from Can We Cancel Culture? Dino Sosi, that's a great line, by the way, and I think you really captured in that one sentence the sentiments of a lot of people sitting on the sidelines observing this phenomenon, going, this is not healthy, it's not constructive, and yet you maintain in the article it has the potential to be both. Tell us how.
I think it can be negative in the sense that we talked about in the earlier segment. There are people, if you're wrongly accused of something, and there's negative allegations, and you're the victim of a mass movement against you, obviously it's going to be really poor for that person. It might be an unjustified result for them. They have no ability in the court of public opinion to appeal.
Right.
For that person. They could be canceled, they could have their professional lives ruined, etc. Like, for individuals that are the focus, it's almost completely negative. On the flip side, if you're able to garner support for a popular movement, say over the past year or so, in the aftermath of the unfortunate incident with George Floyd, there's that tragedy. If you're able to get enough goodwill and support in support of a movement that has a wide, broad support, you can help foster that social movement to a positive end. It's really difficult. It's very tricky because it's such a mass movement. And you have people with different agendas being folded into one movement. It's really incredibly difficult, but it's possible.
Yeah, and I suppose that's the problem. I think there's a sort of an inherent suspicion that comes with something that happens this fast on such a massive scale, in which such irrevocable damage can be done. Again, not everyone participates in cancel culture, and in fact, I would venture to say, Dino, the vast majority of us are on the sidelines observing this whole thing with almost open mouth. The fact that people get away with the kinds of damage and harm that they can cause as frequently as they do, and there doesn't seem to be any way for that. Once you're in the crosshairs, you're pretty much done, and that is terrifying for many ordinary people, don't you think?
I think if you're a regular person, seeing how many of these incidences have become global phenomenon, where now there's people like, say like Jeffrey Toobin, the CNN host, he was in a scandal with the Zoom call. He had a long legal career, a well-respected author, journalist, and then now I think the first thing that comes to mind is this Zoom call. And I think Tina Brown, who worked at Vanity Fair with him, said it's like his whole life of work. That's like a footnote to this incident. And again, I'm not excusing the incident at all, but it's just it becomes the dominating thought that a lot of people have, and it's unfortunate.
Another observation that comes up in the context of cancel culture seems to be, and again, going to the origins and the social media that drives so much of the energy behind it. It seems that it sort of springs from a much younger based crowd, and in a sense, a strongly already imbued with a kind of a victim culture. This seems to be something that's coming out again off a lot of campuses where the idea of the whole social order is broken down into two groups: victims and oppressors. And if you're not an oppressor, well, then obviously you're a victim and sympathetic to anyone else who is. I know I'm oversimplifying it, but sometimes it seems that easy to sort of pick it apart.
I think like I'm a little bit older than the current student these days, and I teach them. It's interesting where I was lucky enough, and I think like yourself, to grow up in an era where if we had differences with people, we would air them one-on-one, face-to-face, and I think you can get 95% of your problem solved that way. I think when you have younger people who their whole lives have had Instagram, Twitter, the ability to articulate themselves globally, rapidly with their peers. And then there's these profound social movements that I think it's really, really hard to create a sign, to organize your friends, to go out. It's much, much easier just to tweet something. And I think it's one of those things that it can feel, it's almost like having candy where it's nice to have a candy or two, but I think people are over-gorging on these things. And I don't think it's good for the people who are participating past a certain point, and I don't think obviously it's not very good for the victims.
I liked your use of language when you talked about the long-term outlook for public spaces as marketplaces of ideas becomes worrisome, and no more worrisome a place in terms of public ideas and a bastion of free expression is, of course, the college or university campus, in which, again, the environment seems to have rather dramatically changed, Dino, to where young conservatives, for example, on university campuses are very quiet about their political persuasions publicly because it's just not a popular stance to take.
It's interesting for myself when I've taught courses, and it's been a sincere pleasure working with the young people because they're so hardworking, thoughtful, kind, generous. Something I say at the very beginning of every class I have is that I'm a huge proponent of free speech, and then I fold in the Section 15 of the Charter, where it provides equality based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, or mental or physical disability. And it's later been kind of expanded to include things like LGBTQI rights. Right. So what I say is I want everyone, conservative, liberal, any part of the spectrum, make sure you say whatever you want to say. If you're going to be talking about a hot button issue, maybe just spend a moment to ensure that what you're saying is palatable to people who might not like your views, so that we have a wholesome, like a full debate.
So again, a little thought going into the forming and expressing of one's opinions in order to at least accommodate the fact that there are definitely going to be people in the room who will immediately disagree. Nonetheless, if you can learn to at least articulate those opinions in a non-threatening way, chances are you'll be heard.
If we, in educational settings, K-12, and especially at the college and university level, if we cannot foster an environment where conservatives and liberals and people of any political stripe and have strong feelings about any important social or political issue, if they don't feel comfortable in that setting, we've done a disservice to them. We've done a disservice to academics. We've done a disservice to Canada and the world.
And okay, so then that's a laudable sentiment, Dino Sosi, a laudable sentiment indeed. But you know what you're up against. You know the avalanche of energy and potential harm that can come out of all of this cancel culture mentality, which is easy and convenient and super fast. So how do you? Again, you're up against this, and yet you really know what you're up against because you deal with it every day in a classroom setting. So how do you get around it?
I think I model for myself. I model respectful, thoughtful listening and respectful, thoughtful retorts to people's thoughts. And I think I spend a lot of time trying to clarify what people are saying. I think if we spend more time listening and less time talking, I think we'll all be in a better place.
But then, of course, the problem is even if we do listen, if we hear something we don't like, then we get to object quickly on social media, and and we're right back to where we started with the whole phenomenon. So it becomes a challenge to not only be heard and to be heard respectfully and to present your ideas in such a way that they can be heard by others, even when they disagree with you. You don't say, here's stupid, here's the right way. You say, here's my way. Look at this as an option. Those sorts I mean, it's simply a presentation of ideas, but nonetheless, you're up against this monolith that's pretty threatening.
I find, I don't talk to my peers about this issue specifically, but I have this feeling that people now that work in academics and even in politics, I would say, and even in the media, I think people are a little bit more careful over the past couple of years about how they articulate their ideas in a public setting. And it's the kind of thing. It's one of the biggest problems with social media, unfortunately. And again, it's versus talking face to face. When you say something sarcastic face to face, you can see like the eyebrow arch. You can see you can have someone pat you on the back, kind of sort of saying, "I was joking about that." When you have a short outburst of a Twitter tweet, the limited number of characters. You're just making something so simple and reductionist that it's really easy. If you're looking not to agree with that person, it's really easy to provide that kind of fodder for that person to disagree with you.
Indeed. Well, it's a fantastic conversation, Dino. I'm grateful that you took the time to be with us on the weekend with us. It's very interesting. We haven't resolved anything, but I think a reasonable, thoughtful discourse about even the nature of the beast is probably a healthy thing to do.
I could not agree more. I think we need to spend a little bit more time talking face-to-face to resolve our differences before going online to resolve them.
Indeed. Dino Sosi, thanks very much. A pleasure to meet you, and I look forward to an opportunity to have this conversation again, because this isn't going to go away. We both know that, don't we?
Yeah, we certainly do. Thanks so much.
Thanks for this. My pleasure. There's Dino Sosi from the University of Toronto, where he is an instructional assistant in technology and media. His conversation piece, and it is at theconversation.com, is Can We Cancel culture?